Good evening, everyone. I'd like to provide a eulogy for my father, Mr. Nilsen. I do have to say it's very difficult to provide the proper eulogy for my father. He was loved and admired by his family. However, the experiences he has had in life are simply amazing, and I just hope I do some justice here to commemorate his legacy and hold it together at the same time, by focusing on the things that he was proud of and the things he loved. So just so you know, the Knights of Columbus, the St. Gerards, are one of the groups he was the most proud of being a member and a Grand Knight. So I would really like to thank the Knights for their service here today. In addition, my father has a great friend, Father Brown. He was here in the earlier service, and he actually gave a nice religious talk to us and said a decade of the Rosary. And he will be at the Mass tomorrow to help celebrate. My father was born in 1929 and grew up in Brooklyn during the Great Depression, with far fewer things in life than he provided to his family. He was not the best student, but he did excel in physical education, where he earned 100 on his 8th grade report card. He went on to star on his local baseball and football teams. The Mill Basin A's baseball team won the 1944 Police Athletic League Brooklyn Borough Championship and finished third in New York City. My dad was the second best player on the team based on his .373 batting average, 28 hits, 20 runs, 13 RBIs in 23 games, and he was only surpassed by his teammate Robert Lennon, who eventually played professional baseball for the New York Giants and the Chicago Cubs. My dad also played sandlot football for the Mill Basin White Eagles and high school football his senior year for the very first Midwood High School football team in 1946. His Midwood team won its first game against Jefferson High School, who eventually went on to win the Brooklyn High School Championship. That game ball that my dad carried as a running back still sits in a glass case at Midwood High School today. My father's best football game was as a White Eagle when he scored 5 touchdowns in one game. In 1951, he was drafted for the Korean War and became a 2nd Infantry Division truck driver. His job was to deliver shells to the guns pummeling the Chinese army at Bloody Ridge and Heartbreak Ridge. He recently told me that only about 25% of the trucks survived out of the 175 that started that campaign. He was nearly a casualty himself when his truck rolled down the hillside, scattering live shells and starting on fire. He was the last truck in a convoy, and the road embankment collapsed when he passed over it. He was told that if he ever abandoned his truck, he would be shot for desertion. So he stayed near his burning truck, saying the Rosary as he waited for U.S. soldiers to come to his rescue. Fortunately, they came. After this incident, he was temporarily taken off the front and ended up playing in a baseball game against the officers, where he hit a home run. The pitcher happened to be one of the top officers, and this guy asked to see the soldier who hit the home run. The officer told my dad that nobody hits home runs off of him, and he asked my father if he would like to be promoted to sergeant. He also suggested that he might become the personal driver for another officer instead of a truck driver. My dad asked him what direction he would be sent for each job, and when he found out that being a driver for the officer sent him south, away from the front, he took that job right away. It looks like baseball skills came in handy, after all. By the way, Father Brown, who you will maybe see tomorrow, was a jet pilot in Korea before he became a Montfort missionary. At the same time he was flying jets overhead, my dad was driving trucks down below in 1951. So when my dad returned to Brooklyn after the war, he called up my mom to restart a relationship that they had for a brief time before he left. Not long afterwards, my mom was diagnosed with TB and was sent to Homer Folk Sanitarium in Oneonta. Well, guess what my dad did when this happened? Well, he began a routine of going to visit her every weekend for nearly a year. Like the Postal Service, neither snow, nor rain, nor gloom, nor night would stay Richie Nilsen from the swift completion of his weekly visit. He never missed one. On one very snowy night, Richie's successful return to Brooklyn was announced on the sanitarium's PA, and everyone cheered. To make matters even more interesting, he got engaged to my mom while she was still a resident, in contrast to many marriages that fell apart in the sanitarium. My dad was told by TV doctors after my mom's successful surgery that it was not advisable to have children for 5 years. However, when he heard opposite advice from Dr. Egan, they decided to have 3 children during that 5-year period. Fortunately, I'm one of them, and so is my brother Fran and my brother Joe. My father is very proud of all 6 of his children. Each one has become very successful in their own right. My oldest brother is a world-class physicist excelling in laser design and applications. I have had great success in business and energy development. My brother Fran is one of the best captains that races sailboats in the Northeast United States and in providing construction services that he now teaches. My sister Kathy is a superb mathematician and an excellent educator. My brother Tom is a high-fidelity expert who has used his computer-aided design skills to create items for high-end automobiles, trucks, and even military aircraft. And finally, my youngest brother Richard has become one of the most recognized names in the industry for handicapping thoroughbred racehorses, an interest he shared with my father. Each one of the children have also had children themselves, and my dad ended up with 15 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. Regardless of how wonderful this legacy and offspring may be, my father's absolute greatest love in his life was his wife of 63 years, Mary Ann Nilsen. My father's love of football continued as a coach during the 1960s and 70s. The Veterans Memorial Football League existed in Port Jeff during this time run by Ed Murphy. Ed was also the head coach of the Americans, and Rich was his offensive coach. Ed liked having my father run the offense of the Americans. He even pointed out at their 50th wedding anniversary that Rich used the offensive playbook from the White Eagles from the 1940s for the Americans, and we never had a losing season. In fact, we won many championships during this time, and I suspect there are many parishioners at St. Gerard's who are former football players from that league who can attest, that include teams like the Tigers, Bulldogs, and Falcons that can attest to how tough the Americans were to beat. He loved the Americans and his time with Ed Murphy. During my dad's work life, he was a butcher with the Atlantic Pacific Tea Company and became the youngest employee promoted to meat manager for one of its A&P stores. He started in Brooklyn and moved out to Long Island during the heyday of residential development on the island. He worked for the A&P for 44 years and used various modes of transportation to travel to work, mostly a VW Bug, but he also rode a bicycle to work for exercise and eventually bought a Suzuki motorcycle when he was 50. He retired at a party where I created fake newspaper stories showing how tough the A&P would suffer following his departure. Little did I realize that the A&P would eventually meet its demise. However, in retirement, my dad decided he was going to keep busy by buying a racehorse and running it at the track. Just lost my place. However, he teamed up with his namesake, Richie Jr., and with some financial support from other members of the family, the saga began and the first racehorse was claimed. Well, the details here are actually just extraordinary. But eventually, Soundview Racing Stables owned 4 racehorses at one time, and one of them, booked up, earned over $250,000 to keep the venture going for 10 years. I don't want anybody to be fooled. There was no money left at the end of it. Okay, Dad moved on to high-end handicapping contests and eventually earned several spots at the National Handicapping Contest in Las Vegas due to his success in qualifying and feeder contests. Richard Nilsen has had a wonderful life.
in his last words to my mom, he said that he did not have long to live, but he was going to meet her in heaven. And he repeated that second comment 4 or 5 times by blowing her kisses. So if there's anyone who deserves to be in heaven, it's my dad, Richard Nilsen. However, Dad, even though you have that extra seat ready for Mom, we hope to keep you waiting for a while. God bless you, Dad, and Godspeed.
Don't know what else to do here. There was quite a crowd here, Mom.